the main things that I want to talk about with the syllabus is the grading and then just, working in an online environment. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you so you guys can see where I'm at on the syllabus as well. Let me do that. Okay, so we're looking at the syllabus here. We're looking at the grading policy. If you look at this, you can see that the majority of this class is essays, right? 65% of our class is essays. And these major essays, units 1 through 3, those are going to be the majority of your essay grades. And all of those essays are ones that are eligible to be revised, right? I encourage revision, right? I don't think any first draft is the best draft. So I would expect you to do revision. And in fact, you are going to do revision in this final portfolio. You are going to be required to revise both Unit 1 and Unit 2. So when you get those essays back and you have the comments on them and things like that, you should revise them, okay? Because you will need to by the end of the semester and submit those in your portfolio. And you'll see that these first two essays that we're working on are 40% of your grade. Okay, then we have, sorry, we already talked about that. Process work, those are all these.
Can I ask a question quick?
Yes.
Is it gonna be like, there's going to be a rough draft and then a final draft, and you're saying revise the final draft after submitting it? Is that what you're saying?
It's going to be very similar to how it was last semester, right? Where you work up to it. You're going to have your peers review it a lot throughout. In fact, you'll probably work with your peers. Let's see, there's one. You're going to work with them 3 times a paper because you're going to build on the paper and you're going to get peer reviews. You also should be working with Sienna at least once. So you're going to have at least 4 people's eyes on your paper, or 4 different opportunities to get it looked at. And then technically you're submitting like a finished draft to me. I give you the comments, then you can revise again, right? But I just honestly don't have all enough time to read through everyone's every single time and give the amount of feedback that I give, because I'm sure you know, Abby, that I give a lot of feedback. So it is technically a finished draft. That's why you're expected to revise it again, especially for that final portfolio. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, then we have process work. Again, those are all the things that we do building up to the paper. So starting next week, you are going to start writing your Unit 1 essay. We basically do like little tiny rough drafts of parts of the essay. It gets reviewed, then you can revise it. And then we start another part of the essay. It gets reviewed, you can revise it. You just plug those straight into your paper, right? You're already writing your paper starting next week. As long as you do those assignments, the writing process should be really easy. And it shouldn't seem overwhelming to write these papers, because I know people will look at these and be like, oh my gosh, 6 pages, how am I ever going to do that? You do the assignments and it's really easy to get there. Okay. And again, it builds and you'll get that feedback to where you need to expand. Attendance and participation, those are your check-ins with me. On Blackboard, I do those every other week in this class, which is why I do the Zoom meetings on the weeks that we don't have check-ins. That way you can communicate with me at least once a week if you want to. Okay, and that's just me checking in, seeing where you are with your paper, how you're feeling, what kind of help you need. That way I can intervene when I need to and get you the help that you need. Okay, of course you can always email me any other time, or Sienna any other time, if you have questions or need help on anything. Okay, you're never bugging me, so don't ever feel that way. Okay, but that's pretty much what those attendance and participation points come from, is communicating with me about what your needs are. Okay, and then last up, we have tutor interaction. That's 5% of your grade. You will need to interact with Sienna at least once per paper. Okay, and Sienna, if you want to jump in, you can kind of tell us more about that. Let me stop screen sharing so we can see your face.
Okay, so as you just said, you guys are kind of required to meet with me at least once per paper. I believe that it's in the grade book. as meeting with me like 4 times, I think.
Mhm.
So with that, it would kind of just be like a conversation that we would have. It would have to be about like work that you've done, either a rough draft, or if you're having particular trouble with like a discussion board, you can email me or text me or set up an appointment. All of that information is in the tutor information tab on Blackboard on the side. And it would kind of just be like a meeting, like a general meeting for me to provide feedback on your work. So I'm here to help you. Obviously, if what I currently have available in my calendar doesn't work for you, email me and we can set up a specific time that does work for you. I am also a student, so my time is kind of weird right now, but I will definitely make sure to meet with you guys when you're available. Trying to think of what else I was gonna say. Okay, so on Calendly, that link that I was talking about where you can meet with me, there's different meeting options for you to register for. There's a process work meeting, a essay meeting, and a random meeting. So for the essay, obviously that would be specifically for like your rough drafts. I am only accepting 10 students to pick a day to meet with me about the rough draft, just because there are about 24 of you and I don't have enough time to go through every single rough draft and give you guys feedback on it, or at least enough feedback. So 10 students for that one. So I would suggest registering for that early, like as soon as you can, because that I assume that that will fill up pretty quickly. And then for process work, that's kind of what you were just talking about. Like you guys are going to be doing steps to set up your essays. So if you guys run into any trouble with that, you can set up a meeting with me, kind of just like a designated time to actually talk about it rather than just sending me questions back and forth. And then I do have like a random meeting option, which is kind of just like if you have questions that would be like a little more complicated than just like an email or a text.
For
So
example,
that's totally up to you guys.
like MLA,
Yeah.
like showing you how to do MLA formats.
Yeah, or if you're
doing a
having like
grammar
particular
lesson.
issues with like grammar and punctuation, yeah. And that's pretty much all I have for you right now. If I do think of something else, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Sienna, if we were to schedule a meeting for rough draft, it would be like after you submit the rough draft, so have the meeting scheduled for then or before submitting the rough draft? Which do you think would be most beneficial?
Probably either one. It depends on what you're looking for.
I'd say, yeah. So, I mean, you will be getting feedback from your classmates as well. So if you think what they gave you was enough, then I would say after you submit your rough draft, but before you submit your final. But if you think that what they said like wasn't beneficial to you, or you didn't understand it, or you just like want more feedback, then I would do it before. And you can even, like, if you have a quick question or something about something that another student said, or you're kind of confused, you can like email me about a specific question, because I can see all of your guys' stuff when you submit it. So.
And that's a great thing too on peer review. When your peers give you feedback, you can flag those things and have interference with me. Like I can go and read and check to see if what they said is correct or not, right? So you don't have to take everything that your peers say and say, oh, they know exactly what they're talking about. This is right. If you ever have questions about it, you can email us, you can flag it, you can do whatever, and we will go and check it to make sure. But like you were asking, Abby, I think that it would probably be a good idea to, like I said, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to have a really finished draft for your rough draft, then I would do it before. But if you're wanting to see what your peers say and then, you know, kind of questioning what they had said, then you would maybe want to schedule it after, kind of thing. So it kind of just depends. When I go through the prompt today, I will kind of tell you how the assignment will be broken up in our process work and give you some ideas on what you can talk to Sienna about for each of those sections. right? Because waiting to the rough draft is not always the best idea, because, you know, getting interference early on helps prevent bigger issues, right? I've had students write the essay and it was completely wrong and they had to start all over, right? You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you are on the right track from the beginning. So it's good to get early interference as well.
And with peer grade, when you flag something, like if I flag something and comment on it, can the person who reviewed that paper see the flag and the comment?
You
I
know
just
what?
want to know
I
in
don't really
case.
know, but in peer grade, they can't see your names anyways unless you put your name on your paper. It's all anonymous. So when you, and I'm going to get into peer grade next week at our next meeting. But as long as you don't put your name on your paper, no one knows who's saying what, except for me. So don't worry about it, even if you flag it, because it's a good thing if you flag it and I say, actually, no, it's this, then they're learning something as well. So it's not a bad thing. Okay. Any other questions about tutoring or when to schedule meetings or how or anything like that? Again, make sure you schedule early on. Like I would schedule now. If you're like, okay, I think I want to do an outline. I think I can get that done in about a week or two. Let me schedule a week or two out from now. Do that now. Because if you wait too long and she doesn't have any openings, then you're losing points. Okay.
Yeah, and if you did just want to get like more feedback, like if I'm unavailable, you can still meet with other tutors in the writing center. They can still help you. It just won't be considered as like points because you're supposed to specifically meet with me. So I would suggest either meeting with me for your process work or your essay. Like if there aren't enough spots left for essays, to meet with me for your process work, because that's where you can like get your tutor interaction requirement fulfilled.
Right. And Sienna knows exactly what the assignment is and exactly what I'm looking for. So she's the best person to get feedback from other than myself. Okay. Any other questions? All right. The other thing that I wanted to briefly touch on was just about course expectations, right? In this course, you are expected to be an active learner, right? Anyone tell me what an active learner is? I know this is so weird for me to be able to teach like this because no one's going to respond to me, I bet.
I was going to say taking part in discussion, giving feedback on what you think you've learned, and being willing to be corrected on what mistakes you made.
Right. There are so many parts to being an active learner. It's about interacting with everybody, in which you're going to interact with your peers a lot through peer grade. It's taking criticism, constructive criticism, and not seeing it as offensive, but okay, this is a learning opportunity. It's actually doing the readings, right? Because I'm not there to just go over the readings for you in class. You actually have to go over them. And if you have questions, you should email me about it. You need to read the prompts, go to meetings, things like that, right? Like you have to put in the effort to learn, right? It's not the same as a face-to-face class where I show up, I tell you everything that happens, and then I tell you to go home and practice something, right? You have to do all of those things on your own. I'm giving you the tools. You need to exercise using those tools, right? So usually the people that don't do very well in this class are people who are not active learners, right? They're not reaching out for help. They are not completing the assignments that I assign. They're not doing the readings, right? I've had people turn in essays and they didn't even read the prompt. I don't even know how they wrote an essay, but they did. Okay, so just make sure that you are taking the steps that you need to. Okay, any questions about that? All right, let's go ahead and get into the prompt, because again, I want to try to keep these meetings short. I know you guys are taking online classes for a reason. Let me pull up my prompt. Hopefully you guys can pull up yours too, but I will screen share with you guys so we can talk about this. Okay, so Unit 1 is an iSearch paper. basically what it is it's a research paper, but it is not a traditional, like, let me research a topic and just regurgitate the information. It is not like that. Instead, this is more of a reflective / storytelling of your research process. Okay, so essentially what you're going to do is you're going to choose a topic, and then you are going to write different parts about the topic. So let me go ahead and first let's talk about choosing a topic, because this first paper can set you up for the rest of the semester if you do it correctly. Your papers can build off of each other. Okay, this paper again is a research. We have two goals here. We're learning how to research, and we are learning more about a topic that we're interested in. Okay, our next paper is going to be a problem solution paper. So again, if you choose the right topic, you can use that research from this paper to make your argument in the problem and solution. Okay, so you can do some of that work now if you do this correctly. And then your Unit 3 paper will be a visual argument. So you'll do like posters of your written argument, but in visual form. So it'll be the same topic. So pretty much all semester, you're going to have the same topic. The only time that you can really change topics is between Unit 1 and Unit 2. But again, I don't recommend that because you can do some of the work now, right? So might as well. Okay, so for topics, you should be choosing something that is hopefully like related to your field of interest or something, a future career choice, just so you can get practice researching in that field, because, you know, researching in English is different than researching within science journals, right? It's just different. So if you can, try to pick something in there. For example, if I were choosing something in my field of work, I would say, okay, I want to research more about online learning, right? That has something to do with my field of work. Okay, or if you're really interested in something else, you can choose that topic. For example, my niece was just about a year ago, 2 years ago, diagnosed with autism. I didn't know a whole lot about autism, so maybe that's something that I want to learn more about because it's something that's important to me, and that I can still use that information. It's still beneficial to me. So either one of those, choose it that way. My recommendation is to try to research a problem within those, either one of those categories, or if you don't know about a specific problem, to ask questions to help uncover problems, because again, your next paper is going to be a problem solution. So I'm going to stick with my example of, I'm going to research student success in online learning. That's going to be my topic. I want to learn more about that, right? Because that's important to me. I want to know how students are successful in online learning. Okay, so that's my overall question that I want to look at. Okay, now that I have my topic, I'm going to write it into 4 different sections, and you are going to actually label these sections within your paper. Okay, so I'm going to break down each part and what should go in each part, what I'm specifically looking for when I'm grading each part. Okay, part 1 is what I already know. This is more of a reflection piece. What you're going to do, you have 2 goals here. You are going to tell me how you became interested in this topic, right? So I could tell you a story about how I'm going to be teaching online and I need to know more of this information, right? That's how I became interested in the topic. And 2, what you already know about this topic. So I could say, you know, I know online learning is really popular right now because of the pandemic. I know that students are more successful when they do these things, or, you know, instructors need to do these things to make the classroom more successful. You know, whatever I previously know without doing any research, what I know right now. Okay, so there shouldn't be any cited sources in this part. It's just a reflection. How did you become interested, and what do you already know? Okay, any questions with that so far? Okay, I will send out a breakdown of the rubric that explains this further about how points are divided up and again, what's being looked for. Okay, so usually this section is about a page and a half at the most. Not too long. Usually it covers the first page, maybe goes on to the second page. It just depends on how engaging you're trying to be, right? Again, if I want to tell the story, I can just say, hey, I'm teaching online learning, so I want to learn more about it. Or I can tell a more specific story about a moment of, oh, wow, this is when I knew that I had to learn more about this. Right? Try to pinpoint an exact moment and give us all the details of it. That would be more engaging. You would probably get more points that way. Okay, but that's, as long as you're doing those two things, you're going to get the points for those. Okay, part 2, this is where you're going to present your overall research question. Again, I want to learn more about student success in online learning. Okay, but then you're also going to ask sub-questions to dig deeper into that topic. And what I mean by sub-questions are, what are some questions I can ask to know more about student success in online learning? So I have some examples here, right? How does online learning impact student success is my question. What are the success rates of students enrolled in online courses? Do online student success rates differ depending on the type of school? How do they compare to other modalities, right? You can see all of these questions are about student success in online learning, but they're just digging deeper and they're specific. So I can go and look up, find an answer that report on it. Do you guys see that? So you'll have your overall question, and then you need to ask more specific questions to help dive deeper into your topic. Okay, and usually that's about a paragraph. Next in this section, you are going to tell us why you want or need the questions to, the answers to these questions. Why is it so important for you to know more about this, right? Again, I can write about how, I want to know the answer to these questions because I want to make sure that my online learning environment is optimal for both me and my students, right? That's my drive behind answering these questions. So, some students write a sentence on this or two, and some students write a paragraph. It kind of just depends. But usually this section takes up about half a page at the most. It's definitely not a long section. Okay, any questions on this? Questions, sub-questions, reasoning behind your questions? Okay. Part 3, this is the most important section, and it'll be the longest part of your paper. Okay, this is where you are actually conducting the research. Okay, you are required to find at least 4 sources, and one of them has to be an interview. Okay, so let's start with the other 3 sources first. You want to try to vary your sources, right? I know a lot of us just want to go straight to Google, right? Because that's what we're comfortable with. Let me just type in my question to Google. That's not the best way to research, especially in academic writing. You will be learning a lot about working with the library and how to find sources on the library site. So I recommend maybe starting there first, or even starting with your interview, but try to vary your sources. Try to find government websites if there are government websites that have this kind of information. Look at peer-reviewed journals.
Really quick, sorry. I can definitely help you with this. I am very familiar with CWI's sources, so if you are struggling with this, you can make an appointment with me and I'll help you through this. It's kind of part of your process work as well.
Right, so again, another opportunity to work. I guess I have not been telling you. So let me backtrack a little bit so I can tell you how. Next week, you're going to be submitting your rough drafts of part 1 and part 2. That's the inquiry questions assignment, creating inquiry questions. It's basically a rough draft of part 1 and part 2. So what you can do if you're kind of struggling of writing that, or if you write that and then you want help expanding on it, she can help you with that. Okay. Then the following, so go ahead, Abby.
I just wondered if, oh man, did I just forget my train? You said something about an interview.
Yes.
Are we going to talk about that, or did I miss?
Yes. I will talk about the interview, yes. That we will get into that next week as well. You'll be doing a discussion board with your peers. You're going to present your topic and give each other suggestions. I will jump on that discussion board too to try to give suggestions. But with the interview, you need to make sure whoever you're interviewing is a credible source and that they are credible enough to speak on that subject. Okay, so for example, usually when I do this on the discussion board, let's say somebody picks mental health as their topic. Someone will be like, oh, you know, I had depression in high school. You can talk to me about it. And it's like you have experience with it, but you're not an expert in the field, right? Instead, you might want to get hooked up with a psychologist, right? Someone who knows a lot about mental health, someone who works in a mental health facility, or you can talk to a psychology teacher on campus, right? If you're taking psychology classes, those would be experts, people who can speak on this subject, right? And are knowledgeable in it. Okay, so whoever you choose, make sure that person is an expert in the field. And again, a lot of these cases, it's really easy to talk to someone on campus. Sienna?
Someone asked a question in the chat. So they asked if you're looking for quality over quantity. So there is like a page number requirement that you do have to meet, but more for like this, I think that Jessica is looking for a lot more quality for this particular area, and then you can go back and fix like whatever you need to get to that page requirement.
Right. I'm really looking for high quality sources, right? We are like in the epitome of misinformation. It's everywhere, right? We are learning in this class to become better researchers. So finding quality sources is the goal for this paper. Do not worry about quantity. I have never had a student not be able to reach the 5-page limit on this. Most students end up writing close to 10 pages on this paper. And I think once you get started on this, you'll realize how easy it is to surpass that limit. So don't even think about the page limit right now. Focus on answering these questions. When I give feedback, if you are short, I always give suggestions on how to lengthen your paper, about places where you need to expand. So don't worry about that for now. Okay. So with each of the sources, again, you're going to have 4 total, 1 being an interview. You are going to need to do tell the story of each of those sources, which is why this paper ends up being really long, because usually this part of the paper ends up being like 3 to 5 pages for most people, because you have to touch on each of these points. Okay, so for each source, I want you to tell the story behind finding the source. How or where did you find the source? Pretend like you are talking to your grandmother who does not know how to work the computer, and tell her exactly how you found that source. You know, I went to the CWI webpage, I went to EBSCOhost, I typed in this question, several articles typed up, but this one jumped out to me the most because of this reason, right? You're telling me exactly how you got to the source. Okay. Once you get to the source, tell me how you determined whether it was credible or not. Right? How do we know that this is a high quality source? Did you look up the author? Does this person have credentials? Are they an expert in the field? Did you go to Wikipedia and look up what their credentials are to make sure that they are knowledgeable enough to talk on this, right? Which is something that you learn in your CWI badges. Right? So tell me, how did you determine whether the source was credible or not? Okay, sometimes that can just be as easy as, you know, I spoke with Jessica Hutton, professor of English, right? Those are my credentials. Now I know that person's credible. I want to know that this source is credible. Tell me that this source is credible. Tell me how it's credible. Okay. Then you need to write a summary of the key information that you were able to get from the source. I don't need to know what the whole entire source said. I only need to know the information that is important to your topic, right? Or what questions that you're trying to answer, right? You're summarizing what you learned. Maybe I read an article all about best practices for getting more student engagement in online learning, right? So I'm only going to talk about those things in there. Okay, so we'll have that. And then once that's done, I want you to react to what you've learned. Like, how do you feel about the information that you learned? Was it interesting? Were you surprised about what you learned? Does it contradict something else that you have read, right? Give me some sort of reaction. Okay, so that's a lot of information for one source. And you're going to do that for 4 sources total. Probably the longest one will be your interview. I would assume that that's going to have the most information just because you're actually interacting with that person. What I don't want is a Q&A. I don't want you to write question, their answer, question, their answer. Instead, write it like a story. You know, I asked the person this question, they answered by telling me these things. Okay. Did I get another question, Sienna? I think I just got a little bubble.
Do you want more than 4 sources?
If you'd like to do
Or no more than 4 sources?
If you want to do more than 4, I'd be happy to read more than 4. It just minimum of 4. So if you want to do even more research for your next paper, that's completely fine with me. Okay, I'm more than willing to read more than 4. Okay. But again, this is going to be written as a narrative. Tell the story of this. Okay, this is all narrative form. I did this and this and this. And if you look at the student examples, they do a really great job of doing that. Okay, so you want to kind of emulate what they're doing. Did I get another question? Uh-oh, I can't hear you, Sienna.
Okay. Aren't all the sources through CWI EBSCOhost credible, or should we still look up credentials?
So this is a great question. You could assume that they are credible, but they are not necessarily all credible because sometimes they have like opinion pieces and things like that in there. We want to find things that are more like fact-based, right? So it's always good to double check. You shouldn't just automatically assume that it is a credible source just because it's on the CWI library. Most of them are, but not all of them. Okay. And again, something that I want to make note of here too is that a lot of, not a lot, but I've had students in the past where they're almost trying to write an argumentative paper here. They're trying to like argue their point. That's not the purpose of this assignment. This is not an argumentative paper. We are looking at these sources from an objective standpoint. What does objective mean? Anyone know?
Without having a stance on it one way or the other.
Right, without any bias or without as much bias as we can have, right? We want to look at this for what it is, right? So we're just reporting on what we're learning. We're not saying like, you know, I'm right about this because this source says so, right? That's later on, okay? This is not argumentative.
So if there were 2 sides to your topic, to the question, you could cover both sides.
Yes, I would highly recommend it, honestly, because it'll make your problem solution much stronger, especially if you're informed on both sides of the issue. So if you can look at both sides, definitely do that because you want to learn as much as possible about your topic so that you're ready to roll when we get into the problem solution. You're like, I've got all the tools to make the best argument possible. And to be a good, make a good argument, you really need to know both sides of the issue. Okay. Great question. Any other questions with that? Okay. Again, that's going to be the majority of your paper. It's meeting these 4 criteria for each of the sources is going to add a lot of length to your paper. Okay. Especially telling it in narrative form. Okay, once you've done all your research, then we are going to reflect one more time. You are expected to do 3 separate little reflections here. One, I want you to reflect upon the entire search experience. Basically, like, here's the key information. This is what I was most able to learn about my topic throughout this whole entire search, right? This was the meat of the information I was able to get. So you're almost like summarizing all of your research that you were able to get into one paragraph, right? You'll also include what you still want to know. You probably won't be able to get all your answers your questions answered. So you'll make note of that here. This is something that I still want to look into, or maybe when you were conducting your research, new questions arose and you want to look further into those for your next paper, right? Something like that. So what are you still wanting to know? And the very last part, people always forget to include this: reflect on your work as a researcher. I want you to think about how you think that you performed as a researcher, right? Did you do a good job finding credible sources? Was it easy? Did it take forever? Did it take a long time, or was it really quick? Right? So think about how you performed as a researcher as a whole. Okay, and that's about another paragraph. So really, sometimes people put these just into maybe one paragraph here, right? What they learned and what they still want to know, and then another paragraph on how they feel they did as a researcher. And that's all that goes there. And again, this section's maybe like half a page to a page at the most. Okay, any questions with that? Okay. Okay, all of these will need to be in MLA format, so you will need to include a works cited page, right, with all 4 or more of your sources in MLA format. Again, something that Sienna can help you with. Okay, MLA format, double space, typed, Times New Roman, 1-inch margins, right, all that good stuff. If you're not familiar with MLA, I have that tab with MLA format. Again, Sienna can help you, I can help you. We'll get it done. It's not a huge deal, but we're working, it's something that is part of your grade, but not a big part. Okay, I'm more worried about your content. Okay, minimum is 5 to 6 full pages. Again, do not be surprised if you go over this. Most people do. Actually, everyone does. Usually it's in the range of like 7 to 8 pages is what I usually get. But I want you to make an effort to not include or not to rely too much on quotes. Yeah, I'm one of those instructors that doesn't really love quotes over, like when people quote too often. Does anyone know why I would not like that?
As it breaks in with the overall flow of the essay, maybe?
Yeah, it breaks in with the flow and it takes your voice away, right? We talk about that in Inkfish about having our voice present in our writing. If you're focused on using these huge, long block format quotes of other people, that's not your voice, that's theirs, right? So we're losing you in your paper to someone else. Okay, and when people overly rely on quotes, it usually is a signal to me that this person might not know what these quotes are actually saying, which is why they're quoting, right? So show me that you understand and paraphrase and summarize when you can, okay? So try to stay away from those if you can. Focus more on summarizing and paraphrasing. Use quotes only when the person has done just such a fabulous job doing it that you don't feel like you could say it any better than they did, okay? Let's see. Again, 4 highly credible sources. My late policy, everyone should have read that in the syllabus, but every day that is late, it's marked down 10%. After 7 days, I just don't accept it. So make sure you get it on time, right? I do also include some tips down here to make the most of your paper. Right, again, this talks more about just like tell it as a story, right? Tell us how it happened as it was happening, because that's what the narrative basically is, right? We want to know from beginning of your search to the end, right? Do it in chronological order. And I want to see your voice shine through here. something that I feel like I wrote on a lot of people's discussions is that the best way to do this is, how would you speak to this audience, right? Spoken versus written. If it's not what you would say out loud, then don't write it that way, right? Because that's not necessarily your voice. You of course need to adjust that based off of who you are talking to, right? You're probably going to be maybe a little bit more formal with me than you would be with your friends, right? You're not going to be using slang and things like that when you're talking to me. So it should still be academic in nature, but you know, I want to see your voice here. I don't want you to try to impress me with fancy words. That doesn't impress me, especially if you don't use those words correctly. So instead, I'm more concerned about clarity. Okay, do I understand what you're trying to say? Is the message getting across to me or not? Okay, and can I kind of hear your voice as I'm reading this, right? We all kind of have that. I learned that not all of us have that inner dialogue, but you know, usually when I'm reading, there's a voice in my head, right? I want to be able to hear your voice in my head when I do that. Okay, a great point here, if you didn't get your answer question satisfactorily, or you didn't find what you were looking for, make note of that, because that's part of the research process, right? I looked and looked and looked for this answer, but I couldn't find it. Right, that's part of research. We can't always find the answers that we want. So if that happens to you, let me know. Like, I want to know that those things are happening, because that's real. Okay, again, the language and style you're writing should belong to you. This one's probably going to be a little bit more casual in nature, because again, you're kind of having a conversation, you're telling us a story. If you want to be more formal, maybe you want to practice the writing style that you're going to be using in whatever field you're studying, you can do that as well. That's totally up to you. But try to make it your own, right? Don't be using English, use your voice. Again, I already said.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Kind of going back to when we're talking about our sources, do we want to use, like, I know last semester you taught us about the P's, like
right.
the PES. Is that something we don't want to do that when we're going through our sources? And
no, P's is for arguments.
Oh, okay.
And you're
exactly
just telling a story here, so don't worry about that. Yeah, we'll get into that next unit. Anyone else have questions so far? Yeah, a lot of these things I already touched on. Again, don't do the Q&A approach. I don't want to see it just like question, answer. Make it, include it into your writing. We'll do a reading on that that kind of shows you how to do that. And be a little selfish. Take advantage of connections and information, right? Especially when you're doing these interviews. I know people are just like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do an interview. But that ends up being one of my students' favorite sources to use, because usually they can point them into the direction of other better sources as well. So use those sources to your advantage, especially the interviews. I even recommend trying to start with the interview if you can, but you need to get started on that early, because, you know, obviously you got to schedule with people. Okay. In our Unit 1 important information, I also include the outline. You can use, some people like to outline. You can use it to do that, or you can use this as a checklist, right? You can kind of go through each of these points. Okay, yes, I told the story, check, done, right? Background knowledge, yep, I got that, check, done. Or you can, you know, fill in your information using this as you go. Either way, you can use it for either of those options, right? Because I know, again, not everyone likes to use outlines. If you don't, use it as a checklist. As long as you do everything that's asked in here, you're going to have a passing paper. Okay? Or you should, as long as you're following the requirements of the essay. Okay? Any questions?
Can the source, the interview, be someone that's like a professional in the field that you're interviewing?
Like I said, as long as they're knowledgeable to speak on the subject. So for like mine, for online learning, I could go, we have a department called CTL, a Center for Teaching and Learning, who does all of the online training. I can go and talk to them. They know about online learning, so I can talk to them about it, right? Or if I go with the subject about my niece who has autism, she goes to a bunch of different therapies, right? My husband's an occupational therapist. Could I talk to him? Probably not, actually, because he does not work with children. He works in an ICU. So would he be knowledgeable to talk on that, about working with children with autism? No, he wouldn't. But he could refer me to one of his friends who does work in pediatric occupational therapy, right? So make sure that whoever you're talking to knows about the questions that can give you the answers that you're looking for. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So if you haven't, has everyone filled out the optional Zoom meeting like survey? Have you gotten some answers on that, Sienna?
We got 11 responses, and a majority of them said Wednesday or Thursday after 8 p.m.
Okay. So we're gonna keep that
have a
open.
couple that said
Okay, we're gonna keep that open. And then I will, once we kind of settle on a date, I'm gonna start next week because we don't have a check-in next week. That will be our every other week Zoom. So next week, we are going to start talking about the process work for this assignment. So we'll talk about the creating inquiry questions. Well, I'll probably talk a lot about peer grade next week. And how that works and what I'm looking for and how you should be giving feedback and things like that. Okay. Any other questions? Helpful? Yes? No? You guys are like, I'm never coming back? All right, guys, let me stop sharing here. Thank you all for coming. If you have any other questions after this meeting, just let either Sienna and I know. And we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.